Hello, everyone. My name is Jake Ross. I'm one of the founders of Cream City Catholic, and today I'm joined by Dr. Paul Kengor. He's one of the preeminent historians on the subject of communism, and we are very grateful to him for joining us today. Paul, welcome.
Thank you, Jake. Good to be with you. Appreciate it.
It's wonderful to be with you. Okay, for the sake of brevity, we only have about 4 questions for you. Okay. And first of all, I want to plug your book, The Devil and Karl Marx.
All right.
Fantastic. Excellent book. If you haven't bought this book, go out and buy it. It's amazing. It'll change your life.
Thank you.
So the first question is from your book. On page 138 of your book, The Devil and Karl Marx, you mentioned Pope Pius XI's encyclical Divini Redemptoris. Yes. In that encyclical, Pope Pius XI made the following statement in regard to communism. This is paragraph 18, and I'd like your thoughts on this. He says, "A third powerful factor in the diffusion of communism is the conspiracy of silence on the part of a large section of the non-Catholic press of the world. We say conspiracy because it is impossible otherwise to explain how a press, usually so eager to exploit even the little daily incidences of life, has been able to remain silent for so long about the horrors perpetrated in Russia, in Mexico, and even in a great part of Spain, and that it should have relatively so little to say concerning a world organization as vast as Russian communism. The silence is due in part to short-sighted political policy and is favored by various occult forces, which for a long time have been working for the overthrow of the Christian social order." So my question to you is, did occult forces or secret societies play a role in the development of communism?
Wow. Now that, that is really, you really zeroed in on something significant there. That full quote, I think I've probably done 100 interviews on this book, Jake. You're the first one to ask me about that. And I think that's one of the most remarkable statements, and not just that encyclical, Divini Redemptoris, but in any of the church's encyclicals on communism, going back to 1846, Pope Pius IX and Qui Pluribus. And I know this is probably what you're getting at. I think it still applies today, frankly. And you have groups, I mean, right now, as we're talking, and I looked at the New York Times over the weekend, I looked at the Washington Post over the weekend. They are obsessed with QAnon, with the Pride Boys or Proud Boys or whoever they are. And to this day, I haven't even looked those names up. I avoid that stuff. I completely avoid that stuff. But and let me say for the record, there's nothing wrong at all with the media looking into extremist groups or alt-right groups or groups that are far right. But what's really frustrating is they don't do this with the far left. They don't do this with Antifa. They a group like BLM, they will not dare touch the Marxist stuff on BLM and Patrisse Cullors. She's I have her book right here. I've read her memoir. I read everything that they write. I read all their stuff, right? I read all of it.
It's important.
Yeah, it is. You have to read everything. And by the way, let me say for the record, I did a review on this for American Spectator. You can find it. It's called "The Politics of Patrisse Cullors." I'm totally sympathetic with the stuff about her father and her brother and their mistreatment, the racial injustices. I'm totally there. But a lot of this book hits on Marxism, ideology, really radical gender ideology in particular. And to bring this back to the Pope Pius XI quote, there's a conspiracy of silence, right, among some of this stuff on the extremist left, the Antifa types. I read this stuff for a living. I mean, every day I'm teaching a Marxism course right now at Grove City College. My students can vouch for this. We come in, we look at what Communist Party USA has up on its website, cpusa.org. We read People's World, which is the successor to the Daily Worker, right? peoplesworld.org. We look at the website of the Democratic Socialists of America. We look at the website of the Trotskyist Socialist Workers Party. We look at the website of Bob Avakian's Revolutionary Communist Party USA. So we look at all this stuff, and I don't know if the word conspiracy is always hard to use, right?
Of course.
I think, Jake, it's not even so much that there's a conspiracy of silence, because conspiracy usually suggests organized, right?
Mhm.
But there's a I don't know, there's a network of silence, there's a web of silence. I don't know that it's coordinated. It's just simply what they're like in the air that they breathe. And when you say to them, have you thought about looking at the extremists on the left? They'd be like, whoa, what extremists on the left, right?
Right.
Congressman Jerry Nadler, riots, protests? I don't see any riots or protests. Well, if
What
all
are
you read is
those?
the New York Times and all you
Yeah.
watch is CNN, you're not going to see it. But you have to watch Fox News, right? If you're on the
Right.
left,
Mhm.
guys like me who are conservatives, I read CNN, I watch CNN, I read NBC. You have to do it. The other side doesn't do this. They
Right.
don't. They're very, very close-minded, and so there's a silence today about these radical ideologies, and even Marxism today in our time.
Was that was this part of the inception of communism as well? Let me read a quick paragraph. It was the introduction to the Communist Manifesto
By the way, what
reference.
page was that on? 138 of my book, or 183? Is that what you
You
said?
you mentioned the encyclical on 138 of your book.
Okay.
But in the introduction to the Communist Manifesto, Friedrich Engels says the following. He says, the manifesto was published as the platform of the Communist League, a working men's organization, first exclusively German, later an international, and under the political conditions of the continent before 1848, unavoidably a secret society. Um, can you kind of talk to us a little bit about that? What does he mean by this, and especially in relationship to the paragraph 18, where he talks about these various occult forces that have been working for a long time to overthrow the Christian social order? Was
Yeah,
there some type of plot or conspiracy before the development of the production of the Communist Manifesto?
well, so okay, so the way that it was developed. So the Communist Manifesto was published in 1848, which would be 2 years after Pius IX did Qui Pluribus, to show you there that our Pope, our Church, was on this stuff even before the Communist Manifesto was published. And so what the Communist Manifesto literally is, Jake, and I know you know this, it's the programmatic statement of the Communist Party. It actually at that point would have been the Communist League, which was a group of about 30 to 40 communists that Marx and Engels had organized. They were all guys except for Marx's wife. I think she was the only woman in the group. And for all these kind of diversity liberals out there, right? It was all dead white German European males. All right, the people you guys usually tell us are bad, right? But they love this group. They were so about 30 to 40 of them, and they were meeting. I mean, Marx and Engels spent several years writing everywhere from in Germany to Brussels. In fact, really when Marx was in Brussels, 1846, 1847, quite literally under the shadow of St. Michael the Archangel Cathedral in Brussels, that he was finishing this document. And so Marx and Engels referred to it. So the Communist League said, we need a statement. We need, a manifesto, right? We need a document laying out, articulating our beliefs, right? What does a communist believe? And they eventually evolved into using the term manifesto. I quote in the book this remarkable letter from Engels to Marx, where Engels says, give a little more thought to our communist confession of faith. They actually call it the Communist Confession of Faith. He says, I think we should drop the catechetical form and refer to it as simply the manifesto, right? The
Mhm.
Communist Manifesto. So there's this sort of religious language, right? Confession
Right.
of faith, catechetical. And I think that's good language because as the church described it, and as even people like Ronald Reagan said, yeah, Marxism, Leninism, that religion of
Mhm.
theirs,
Mhm.
they treat it like a religion. They treat it, to quote Pope Benedict XVI, as this sort of like new Jerusalem, right? This new utopia, this
That's right.
heaven on earth, this materialist heaven on earth without God. I don't know if I answered your question there or not.
I think, yeah, you're starting to. We're getting closer, and that leads me into my next question. So, which is not directly, this is not directly in reference to your book, but on April 20th, 1884, Pope Leo XIII made the following observation in his encyclical Humanum Janus, which was his encyclical on Freemasonry. And under the caption, Communism, the Sequel, in paragraph 23 of that encyclical, he says that these doctrines, communism, are equally acceptable to the Freemasons, and that they would wish to constitute states according to this example and model is too well known to require proof. What is it about the doctrines of communism that make them agreeable with the doctrines of Freemasonry?
Well, it's a good question, and now I see what you were getting at. I wish I could answer that for you better, but I don't know Freemasonry enough.
Okay.
But I mean I know communism very well, but you're touching on a really significant and insightful point there, and indeed our popes did not see this stuff as unrelated, and maybe as a kind of a force that combines all of us together. Look at Pope Pius X on the modernists, right? Writing about the modernists, and there he talks about this. In fact, he uses the term wicked confederacy, right? Of what he calls this barbarous, wicked confederacy of nihilists, socialists, communists. Does he use the term progressives? I should know that.
But nihilists, socialists, and communists.
Yeah, nihilists, socialists, and communists. Does he use the word progressives in there? I
believe that term is used. I'm not sure if it's used in that specific.
Right, but in that specific line. So he's talking there about people generally who are modernists who, effectively come up with their own definitions, definitions of reality, their own definitions, to borrow from Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy, right? Their own meanings of meaning, their own definitions of life, of meaning, of the existence. And so that's really the kind of the glue that binds a lot of these groups together.
But obviously they're totally
to the extent that
they're antithetical to the Christian idea as well, both Freemasonry as well as communism.
Right, that's right. And to the extent of Freemasonry, to what extent was it related to communism? Was it a precursor to? I don't know, but to my knowledge, I don't think Marx came at it not from Freemasonry, but I'd say more in part from atheism, right?
Now it is interesting from the little research that I've done. It appears that Friedrich Engels was part of the League of the Just, and his connections in the League of the Just, which was the League of the Just, was kind of a precursor to the Communist League. He had, certain acquaintances like Karl Schaefer, all the way back to it was Louis Augusti Blanchi, who was a revolutionary of the Italian Carbonari. Now, the Italian Carbonari had been excommunicated by the Pope, and all of those individuals were Freemasons. And so there's a very interesting relationship there, and also you have these different various movements in Europe, Young Germany, Young Italy. That seem, and I believe they have Freemasonic roots.
Yeah, and I was actually going to say I could see it more likely in Engels on that side than Marx, but I don't know enough. Interesting.
Okay, yeah, very good. Question number 3. We progress. You write about the infiltration of the Catholic Church in your book in paragraph 57 of Pope Pius XI's, back to his encyclical, Divini Redemptoris. The Holy Father says the following: communists try perfidiously, this is a quote, try perfidiously to worm their way even into professedly Catholic and religious organizations. Is there more evidence to this claim of infiltration into the Catholic Church?
Oh, sure. Yeah. And in fact, the longest part of my book, Devil and Karl Marx, is actually the section on infiltration and manipulation of the churches. And that a number of people I've heard from, Jake, told me that actually was the most terrifying part of the book for them. That was worse than what they read about the black masses and at the prison of Pitesti, and where they forced priests to consecrate human excrement in the form of hosts and shove it in people's mouths, or the stuff on Marx and his poetry about the devil, his writing about the devil. For them, what was scarier was to see the level of infiltration and manipulation of the churches. And as you know, I spend more time, because there's more evidence of this, of the successful penetration of the mainline denominations. Now, that was testified to, quite literally testified to at length before the US Congress by people like Manning Johnson, Ben Gitlow, Louis Boudin's. I quote their congressional testimony at great length. The Episcopal Church, the United Methodist Church, the mainline Presbyterians, what eventually became PCUSA. But that said, they targeted the Catholic Church as well. And that was done specifically through Earl Browder and what was called Earl Browder's outstretched hand effort.
Okay.
They actually had less success, I think, with the Catholic Church than they did with the Methodist or the Episcopal Church, because frankly, of the institutional Roman Catholic Church, because of leadership in Rome, which I wasn't intending to take a shot at Pope Francis, but there's none of that leadership today. Mm-hmm. I mean, on an issue like communism, Marxism, and I'm not saying that Francis is a Marxist or anything like that, but he's completely silent on the issue. I quote in the book, and I share this every chance I could get, especially if anybody is critical of Francis. Francis has said, quote, "The Marxist ideology is wrong," unquote. But Jake, that is the only thing he has said. He has said absolutely not a single word more. Believe me, I know, because I look for the quotes all the time. And right now is a time when we could really use an encyclical on modernists and nihilists and socialists and so forth. But I don't think we're going to get it.
Well, right, and especially when over a third of millennials approve of communism.
Yeah, exactly. And
there's the 70% of millennials apparently they approve of socialism, and 30% approve of communism.
That's right. And the data, I was arguing with a colleague on this. He's like, you guys, when you're talking about communism and socialism. I mean, look at the data on the number of people who say they support the abolition of private property, who say they support socialism. Look at the enormous success that the Democratic Socialists of America are having right now in running candidates in the Democratic Party primary. AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib. Even Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders was never a Democrat until he ran for the Democratic nomination in 2016. He was an independent, and his party, we've never found proof that he was an actual member, but he was a formal presidential elector for it, was the Socialist Workers Party, the Trotskyist Socialist Workers Party. So this is very real. I mean, the threat here is very real, and we're not getting any leadership from Rome on this. Now, on your question, so to what extent did they infiltrate the Catholic Church? They were stopped, I think, by institutional leadership in Rome, by people like Fulton Sheen, by really courageous bishops, really intelligent bishops. And I even quote in the book Dorothy Day's Daily Worker, slapping back the outstretched hand of Earl Browder. And you guys from America Magazine, the Jesuit magazine, all right, publishing a piece in the summer of 2019 called The Catholic Case for Communism. Man, I'll tell you, that's unbelievable. That is profoundly and shockingly ignorant of the church.
Well, especially
Dorothy Day would scream at you guys for this.
Absolutely,
right?
Absolutely. It was Pius IX in 1846. He said, "Communism, as it is called, a doctrine most opposed to the very natural law. For if this doctrine were accepted, the complete destruction of everyone's laws, government, property, and even the human society itself would follow."
That's right. Called a filthy medley of errors was the, and in the book I have a whole chapter, as you know, on Bella Dodd, and Bella Dodd on the issue of whether or not she did indeed try to organize the placing of, quote, over 1,000 communist men, unquote, in Catholic seminaries. So I go through that, the proof of whether or not she said that. and at the least, this stuff was desired. Some of this stuff was attempted, but they didn't have a lot of success with the Catholic Church. But nonetheless, to the extent that they did place some people in there, I think you could argue that the tentacles from it, seeds from it, eventually grew and caused some damage. I mean, look at liberation theology of all things in the 60s and 70s.
What did Archbishop Fulton Sheen have to say about infiltration into the Catholic Church?
Yes, and Sheen spoke about it in Rome, and it was reported on by the New York Times, and I quote that. And I think, Jake, that what Sheen was saying about it at the time, I think he got it from Bella Dodd. He wouldn't have had to get it from Bella Dodd. He would have known this and much more. I mean, he even brought Louis Boudin's into the church when Louis Boudin's name was still on the masthead of the Daily Worker. It's just amazing. I mean, you talk about a conversion. I mean, that's just amazing. But he brought Bella Dodd back into the church, and Bella Dodd, Sheen said that in Rome right after he received her into the church, and after she quite literally would have went to confession with him. And so he would have definitely heard it from Bella Dodd, and Bella Dodd would have confessed it, because she was carrying a lot of guilt. She was carrying the cross for her previous sins and her lies and her mass deception, and being a party organizer for, especially for the teachers union in the state of New York. So she felt genuinely really bad about what she did.
And she helped infiltrate the teachers unions.
Oh yeah, terribly so, with thousands of, and she, in fact, when she testified to Congress at great length, that's what she spent most of her time testifying on, was what she did on behalf of the Teachers Front, as they call it.
And roughly what year was this?
So I give all the dates in the book. I think 52, 53.
Okay.
Yeah, during that period. And for, this is what's difficult for Catholics. And I've seen some really sloppy stuff on the internet about this. She actually did not testify to Congress on the infiltration of the church, at least in open session. So when people are quoting her on this allegedly, and they're saying she said this to Congress, no, they're pulling that from somewhere else. But this is very interesting, Jake. I'm still on this. Her FBI file is still classified. We filed FOIA requests on this, Freedom of Information Act request. It is astounding that over 60 years after her death, we still don't have her FBI file declassified. I mean, we've got Alger Hiss's file, we've got the Rosenbergs, Obama's mentor, Frank Marshall Davis, Howard Zinn, on and on. We still don't have her file. And so I know she said more behind closed doors. And but a lot of the stuff that's out there that's attributed to her is not well grounded. But she, back to my original point, she did to Congress speak at great length about what she did on behalf of the teachers union to penetrate that for the Communist Party. That was her job. That was her task.
Wow, that's amazing. And there's still a lot of questions to be answered then.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
So you think that the FBI is obviously reluctant to release the information because it'd be so damning?
I don't know. It so many of these cases, you would think. I can say this. I know this from experience. They will. I mean, a lot of times it's just the bureaucracy of Washington and getting somebody to move something. And initially, this could have been that. We filed this request. Oh man, I think it was at least 2017, 2018. But we're past that point now. The bureaucracy knows about it. And I've seen in the past that they won't release something because certain people are still living. But at this point, I mean, if somebody was 50, 60 years old in 1950, right? I mean, what are they now, 120 years old?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's, and also they redact these files. They take names out. So I don't know why it hasn't been declassified, but the attorney that I'm working with on this, we're really puzzled by this one. Yeah.
Wow. Well, Paul, that's it for today. We don't have any other questions for you. Fascinating information, and we really appreciate you coming on the show and talking with us today.
Well, thanks, Jake. Happy to do it, and sorry I didn't have more time, but
oh, that's perfectly fine.
Life.
I want everyone to go out and buy this book. If you haven't done so already, it'll teach you a lot about Karl Marx and about communism, its origins, and really the nature of communism and how scary it is. So go out and buy this book. Paul, thank you so much.
Thanks. Scary indeed. Take care.
That's right. Take care.
God bless.